Continuing with the issue tracker demo project, Jeremy's going to show us some things with event sourcing snapshots and a bunch of other improvements, both for making your applications more reliable, but also improve developer experience.
Hey, so before we get off this test, just I want to pay attention to the code that's on here a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm really exercising the projection part of Marten. Of here Marten's just storing the events, but now let's rehydrate the incident based on the one event, but still pretend maybe it was like 10 events. This aggregate stream async, this is what we call a live aggregation, or if you're going to be a hoity-toity functional programmer, it's a left fold. It's the aggregate aggregate function in link speak. That's the easiest way to get started. At no point have I had to do any other configuration with Marten to do this. There's nothing. There's no hint of this. One of the things philosophically with both Marten and Wolverine is we want you to be able to pick it up and go as fast as possible. Helps adoption. I have scar tissue from a previous OSS effort where people complained it was too hard to get started. You know how that goes. Marten's just seeing, I got conventions, you asked for an incident, I see the conventions about how to mutate this thing. I can just go. All right. Now let's flip over, because this is going to come up in the next section. Now I'm going to flip over.
Go back to the test for 1 second.
Yeah.
So that, line 48 there, the store, you're actually, just a point of clarification. You're going, there you go. So that's getting the document store. We're doing a post to the endpoint. It's just returning, hey, here's the ID of the thing you'd returned. And we're actually looking in the database here to get that incident. Yeah.
Could also do it this way. Got my new helpers. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. That's cool. Okay. Yeah. I was just making sure I got it before you moved on.
Yeah. So before we go to, we need to go to a command. Yeah. Let's go to a command that updates an incident. And then let's introduce some Marten snapshotting a little bit and start talking about how to go faster. So let's build another endpoint. This time we're going to do a command handler that is going to accept a categorize incident command. It's come up as a HP request. We're going to use this URL pattern. Not real fancy on the rest stuff. You guys can do that yourself. But logically, when we take the request to go categorize the incident, we want to check at a minimum, is the incident still open? Because if it's closed, it's invalid. That's just what we decided the requirements are. So let me talk about this. And again, we're trying to go down a vertical slice architecture approach. Let me get into a few more things. So you'll notice the validation method is pulled off into a separate function altogether. Put a pin in where did the incident come from. We'll get to that in a second. But saying if you have the current incident data for this incident ID, we're going to do a little bit of validation. So this is kind of a poor man's railway programming. If anybody out there is familiar with this is kind of Wolverine's way to do it. Another philosophical thing, the main command here, we want this mostly to be happy path. So we're going to do a validation in what we call a compound handler in the Wolverine docs. So validate, there's a couple other possibilities. Naming convention, if I have a method called validate in the endpoint or a message handler that tells Wolverine, hey, I want to call this before the main handler. And Wolverine also knows, so we've heavily embraced the problem detail spec. It's kind of a nice way of saying, hey, this is just an easy, standardized industry way to communicate validation errors about your request. So if you try to close an instance, or you try to categorize an instance that's already closed, we can say, nope, you shall not pass. Going to return a problem details something else. Here's what's wrong. That's going to give you an HTTP status code of 400. Just means bad request. And if everything's good, Wolverine has a special value, just Wolverine continue no problems. And it means exactly what it says. Everything is wonderful. Just keep going.
Whenever I write that, I can't help but hearing myself say it in a Jamaican accent for some reason. I'm going to cut that out of the video, but I just wanted you to know.
I love that the Phantom Menace, the guy that was the
Jar Jar?
the horrible Jar Jar Binks. Yeah. So I don't remember which Star Wars show it was, but he got to be in one of the Star Wars shows
got
as
to be a Jedi. Yeah.
So I've been explaining this top to bottom, but we need to probably come back down here. So we're passing in the incident ID as a route argument. But at the same time, so a lot of these event commands we're using event sourcing, you generally need, here's a command, and then I need the current state of my stream, which is represented by our incident type. Knowing those two things, let's take this out, that's old. I don't care anymore. Knowing those two things, I can decide what to do. And this is a really simple example. It's just, if you get here and everything's okay, I'm going to say it's categorized. We could just to show you that this could be a little bit different. Hang on. Ooh, I need to change some things, but pretend with me here. One thing you could do is say, hey, nope, you know what? If it's already this category, I'm going to return null. That means do nothing. I'm going to get out of here. Just to let you know, there is a decision that's happening here what to do. So again, our philosophy, trying to get you to the behavioral code is a pure function. Given the command coming in and the current state of your stream, decide what to do next. And what you decide to do next is some combination of these are other events I want to append, or we'll show an example later where we send an outgoing message. Just kind of tell you how this pops together. So
one question: if you return null there, what's the status code? What do you get in the response?
It's still at 200.
Okay.
It's just nothing gets appended.
Yeah. Very good. That's what I would expect.
No, I'm going to be clear. No, that does work. I'm not going to be doubtful about that. So the attribute here, we try to minimize the amount of attributes and marker interfaces and whatnot you use, but minimizing is still more than none. But this aggregate here, this is telling us, it's telling Wolverine, hey, incident is the relevant aggregate state for the stream we're trying to edit, and you're going to look it up by the incident ID route argument. There are some conventions that make it go fast. Actually, the easiest thing to do is call it just ID. But the old example, just showing you have power to make it more explicit.
So if it was ID, you wouldn't need the argument to the aggregate.
Yeah,
very good.
Correct. Yeah. I think the easiest thing to do is to show the code generation, and let me knock that out real quick. Take that away. Just showing you code generation. There's a minor problem for another day. Just showing you what Wolverine is actually doing around it. You can see it's calling that validate method first, and it's checking if it's not no problems, double negative. If there are real problems, you're going to write problems, which is using problem details, whatever, status code 400, get out of there. But if you go on You're going to create this response.
Yeah, it's just calling the post on it. Yeah.
Cut this. Fuck, that's a bug. Motherfucker. Here, cut it. I'm gonna have to make you restart with me. Nope. I know what I did wrong.
So one question before you restart here on that validate, if that incident isn't found, what does does the validate just return something at that point?
It'll do nothing.
Okay.
Let's check this again. Here, you want to go ahead and start me up again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the joys of doing things live. Found a little problem in my code real quick, and we stopped. Let me curse a little bit and got this fixed. So I had to make a little bit of change to categorize this incident. I'm not super thrilled with this. I have to tell Wolverine, hey, this is an empty response. This is just a way of saying this is the event that needs to be appended to the stream. So more attributes, kind of ugly, but I'm gonna soften the blow here in a minute. Taking a look now at what it's doing, just to see where did things come from. The way we're finding the incident go. Okay, this one's really important. It's an ugly line of code, but we know what the incident ID is. We've tried to parse that up here. See a little code there. If it's ugly and it can't be parsed, it's going to return a 404. It's really the route didn't match. This is kind of a little nicety. But we're invoking an API in Marten that's called Fetch for Writing. That was built purposely for what we're doing here to set us up to grab the latest version of the incident. You can see it's passing in the incident ID. It's also using the version. It is picking the version. We're going to supply the version as part of the command. That's important. Let me show you this right here. This right here is, say if you're from a user interface and you're clicking, I'm looking at the incident in the user interface and I say, I want to categorize it to this. If the UI knows what the current version is, and we'll talk about how you do know, it's going to pass that along, and it's telling Marten, hey, I want to edit this incident, but I'm assuming that it's starting at version 5. So as Marten tries to look at it, we pass in the version. If somebody else has come back in on a different terminal off in another room and categorized it before you, this will actually quietly reject it.
Yeah.
Reject it faster. It'll throw an exception, so you'll have to catch that. But that's better with ASP.NET Core middleware. So hopefully what I'm trying to prove out here is, even though there's very little code here, this is actually building something that's pretty robust. We've actually built in optimistic concurrency protection. So not only will it check kind of going in, has somebody changed this before I let you proceed here? When you come back later and call, and I know this is happening from Wolverine itself, but at the point of the line of code, when you're trying to commit the transaction, it'll check right there. If somebody else has magically gotten in there just in time and changed it off to the side, this will still reject it with an optimistic concurrency check.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So we're setting you up right off the bat to be robust. That's
so
something.
Empty response, Jeremy. That empty response is, just so I'm clear. Normally, when you return something from a Wolverine endpoint, the first thing, if you return something that's the HTTP response, like you did in the other example, it was the tuple that was the response, and the second argument was the event or the command, right? So empty response says, what I'm returning from this should be handled by, got ya, okay.
Yeah, it's not the response.
Yeah.
And for another Gen X reference that our basically every other viewer won't get, But so let us say, like, not the mama.
That's right. Love it.
Love that show as a kid.
Super cool.
Okay. If there's more logic, this is what we call the aggregate handler workflow. This becomes very valuable down the line as a way to isolate the decision-making process away from, this infrastructure that has to be there to do optimistic concurrency checks. It is, let me see, I might, there is, you know what? I always struggle to remember how to do the syntax. There is an option you can actually go to exclusive or pessimistic locking.
Oh, wow.
Use that with caution for all the same reasons you would always use that with caution.
Yeah.
But that's something that's possible. But the point I'm trying to make is allow you to focus on business logic and expressing what it's supposed to do, and not be worrying so much about technical details. More attributes than I'd really like to have. But talk about this just a little bit more. One of the things I don't like about using MVC, ASP.NET Core MVC, or even minimal API is you start returning those iResult objects everywhere. And it's kind of a mystery meat API. So you have to do a lot of work now to add a lot of decorations for open API metadata, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've seen it in code.
Absolutely.
So Wolverine HTTP, one of the reasons to use it instead of trying to use Wolverine as a mediator tool underneath MVC Core is Wolverine HTTP can glean a lot more information about the open API metadata off the method signatures.
Yeah.
By throwing this problem details validate up here, it knows the open API generation. It's smart enough to know that, one of the possible response types is 400 with whatever the problem details MIME type is. I don't remember what it is. And down here, it knows that, you're going to get a 204 is it can glean stuff here. Places in just a second when we go and do an endpoint that actually tells you this is what I'm sticking out. It's going to look from the body, and it's going to be able to tell you that. If we had the Fluent validation middleware hooked up, it's smart enough to know that any endpoint where Fluent validation kicks in, that you have a possible problem details with 400.
Love it. Yeah, I'm trying to superimpose this in my mind of what a typical endpoint would look like. You'd have all the code for reading that route parameter, looking it up in the database, and the concurrency thing, the versioning thing you're doing here. I know that's been in a lot of my own applications one of those things that you wake up in the middle of the night like there's going to be a millisecond where I screw that up, just because they're in proximity. You get it fast enough, but I hope it never happens. So either you're being lucky or you're not dealing with it at all. And everything you have here is just focused on the problem at hand instead of all those details. So beautiful.
Yeah, and the concurrency, that's something that actually happens.
Oh yeah.
That's something I've got a list of, so I'm still on Pandora instead of Spotify of, I kind of have a ranking of, what bands come up the most often. It's always CCR, and then, in terms of what questions I get asked or the things that I help my customers with, or
Mm-hmm.
just random people on Discord, concurrency is always top 2 or 3 sources of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a testament to how good our frameworks and our development tools are that you can build all this from the perspective of a single user with no concurrency. But your your tests are always a load of one, but no, I really appreciate you adding this in. Do you have more to say about that versioning thing and how that's working?
The versioning, no. Well,
Okay.
we need to hit it. We need to come full circle and show an actual get route.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk about the aggregate just a little bit, how you get it. So when we were running this unit test, I showed you, we're just we're gonna do a live aggregation. what this is doing in memory is, in memory, it's fetching all the raw events, which if there's not very many, that doesn't matter. And it's running them through all these create and apply methods one at a time to get you to the right thing, right? So if you have a short stream, that's fine. Live's pretty easy. It's a default. I don't have to tell Wolverine about it at all. But in the real world, is you start getting bigger streams. And this is a real thing. This is something I help clients with all the time. You need to introduce some kind of snapshotting, so that when we're calling this categorized incident, instead of building up the incident from scratch every time, what if there's 100 events behind it, which happens? What if it's 2,000 or 3,000 events behind it? Maybe that's a modeling problem, but hey, you're not perfect. You're not going to have perfect foresight on exactly how modeling should work. So, kind of getting into a pet peeve of mine here. A lot of event sourcing people will tell you, oh, you just designed it so you keep your event stream short. That's not always feasible. Sometimes it's more complicated. You're not omniscient. So let's be able to use snapshotting. And we got a couple different possibilities here. So now I'm going to come all the way back to my Marten setup, and I might tell Marten to I want Marten to update the incident completely 100% in line. Actually, here's something. So now what's going on? Jeffrey, I don't know if you've seen this yet.
I've never seen that. No.
Yeah, that's really recent. So as a quick tangent, one of the problems with building these kind of long-running frameworks that people actually use is, sometimes as you introduce optimizations that change behavior of the underlying framework, you can't just do it because this has a potential to break people that use the tool in a certain way. Right. So you got to put a lot of this stuff behind feature flags, and it's really annoying for people like me. But this kind of thing is a testament to how hard we try to not break existing users while enabling newer users to get the good stuff.
Say what that's doing.
This right here, okay. So if we switch to the inline, what this means is anytime you append new events to an incident, we're going to take those events and we are going to put them on top of the current version of the incident, and we're going to save it at the same time. So that you actually have an incident document saved in the database that exactly reflects the state of the incident stream, because we're doing it all at exactly the same time, same transaction, the whole bit. That optimization, Jeffrey, makes it possible that makes sure that internally it's always it would actually be applying the new event on top of this exact object instead of fetching it again.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of obvious when you put it that way, but some people will mutate the aggregates themselves, and you can't turn it on by default. So.
Gotcha.
So one thing I want to point out, I'm not going to change the code at all. I changed the lifecycle of this incident, where it's built up, but that doesn't impact our code whatsoever, because I made this big deal out of calling out this fetch writing API we're using under the cover. This in Marten, this is completely wallpapering over, is the incident going to be live? Is it done inline? Or another mode called async I'll introduce in a second. No matter what, it's giving you the very latest version of the incident, and it's tracking what the current incident version is for that versioning for you. Even if it's async, it'll grab the latest snapshot and any events on top of that snapshot and forward it for you. So it's just going to work, but it also gives you reversibility. So if you decide, hey, we're doing this live, but it really needs to be snapshotted, you can actually pull this off.
Yeah.
Third option, just this one's just a tiny bit more. It's async, and then this one.
Yeah.
But so this is a big thing. Now, if we run this asynchronously, it just means there's a background process that's trying to update incidents across the board as things come in. But we're doing it in a background process so that it's a little bit of performance optimization. I don't have to take the hit of also updating the incident right here. So my writes can be faster, but my reads can also be faster because, I've got data coming up.
So you're writing the incident categorized, and then the response goes to the client, and that async daemon then is building that aggregate. So you're not eating that time in your request response line. That's beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So making a big point out of this, Jeffrey and I talked about this before we started. Other event sourcing tools, or a lot of people in the event sourcing community will tell you that, oh, you can't use snapshotting. It's too complicated. It's too problematic. You might have to rebuild it, all kinds of other things. That is based off of technical limitations of some older event sourcing or dedicated event sourcing tools. We do not believe that is an issue with Marten. We believe that we are robust enough that you can to to get faster responses here. We'll even go farther. Even go farther to the point where if you needed to change what incident looks like if it interprets events in a different way, I'm not going to get into it too far, but you could deploy a new version, like a version V2 of the incident projection, set it to asynchronously. You could do a full blue-green deployment where you could deploy the new version of the incident projected with zero downtime and not change this code whatsoever.
That's fantastic. Beautiful.
That was a ton of work to get there.
Yeah, that wasn't something you did in an afternoon.
No, that took that took some partnership with the Jasper FX client to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So to some of my buddies in Copenhagen and Budapest, thank you guys.
We all thank
you know who you are. I guess taking a shift, quick one to the read side of things. So we do actually need to tell you, how do you get to an incident? I'm going to come back here and I'm going to put this back to inline quick. We're going to add another. I didn't think to do this ahead of time. We're going to add another NuGet package. I'm going to put strictly a Marten ASP.NET Core helper, but this is cool. It's worth the payoff. Okay, give it an incident ID. Shoot me out the most current. Need to get so Wolverine, like people maybe are hopefully getting used to now, supports method injection. MVC Core does this in the most recent version. Minimal API does it too. So let's see. Let's see if I can do this right. I've slept since I've done this the last time. Okay, bang, it's done. You might actually have to help this one out a little bit with. We'll figure that out later. So this is giving us an HP endpoint to retrieve the current state of an incident. This does depend on the incident being pre-snapshotted. You know, it's written into the database. But what's important here is this is streaming the JSON that is the raw JSON that exactly reflects the incident that is persisted in the backing database. It's streaming it byte by byte down the HTTP response. So don't deserialize it back into an object. You just immediately serialize it to JSON to write it down. This is the very fastest possible way to write data straight down. So that's a special Marten capability we've always been kind of proud of. I hope people actually use it somewhere.
Yeah, and I think having those projections. I mean, the data's already exactly in the shape that you need for the response. That's kind of the whole point. So there's no reason to map it to domain objects and all that kind of stuff. You create those snapshots for what the consumer needs to read. So send it to them. Beautiful.
So, and that's a good point. This is something that's probably much more valid to do with event sourcing, where you're purposely building projections that give you exactly what the client wants, as opposed to, having a single source of truth where you load an entity and then you pull AutoMapper or something like that to write it out to details and blah, blah, blah. So.
Love it. That is cool.
Okay. All right. Maybe close out today's recording. Let's talk about how to make things go fast, how to make a system keep scaling up. And we'll throw in a couple new behavioral things. So let's skip to the very end of the logical workflow and let's talk about an endpoint that closes an incident. So little command, who the user is that's closing it, and a version. There's something, if you're looking at really old versions of this sample code and looking at the new, one thing I've changed is I'm relying on Marten to capture the timestamps for us because it does. So I'm not passing in the time. Should also note that this whole integration, it's possible to emit open telemetry spans for everything that's happening here. You just have to opt into it. But even when it's saving events, Marten is tagging the events with the correlation and causation IDs that it can detect from the current open telemetry tracking. So if you have OTel turned on in just your ASP.NET Core integration, even without the Wolverine stuff, it's going to tag the events of the database. You could see the correlation ID, causation, some tracking information that'll point to an OTel span over, whatever you're using, where it's Prometheus, App Insights, any tool that does OTel span recording for you. So that's a really important thing. The biggest competitor of Marten, I guess I should throw this in. We're pretty sure by NuGet download numbers, we believe, obviously, I believe Marten is the most robust technical platform for doing event sourcing in the .NET ecosystem, and I think it's the most robust by a wide margin. We also think we're the most heavily used, just based on NuGet downloads. So, we're real. But I think our biggest competitor is people trying to roll their own event sourcing from scratch. And just know there's a lot of things to deal with outside of the super easy sugar rush of building that tiny first use case. A lot of the tracking, the tracing, the concurrency we've talked about, that's stuff that takes a long time to get right. Anyway, off the soapbox. So closing an incident, just show you there's a little helper. Jeffrey, this is pretty new too. Built this for a Jasper FX client just in December. Updated aggregate. what we want to do is, no matter what's going on, we want to return the current state of the incident as the response body.
Mm-hmm.
So the updated aggregate, it's just a declaration of this is what I want done. So Wolverine and Marten working together, they're going to do it in the most efficient way possible, no matter how you've configured your Marten projection. So
Beautiful.
that's a nice little thing to pay attention to. That was something that's been a weakness. But as we close the incident, we're going to emit, potentially emitting an incident closed event. But I might also want to spit out a message to Wolverine's messaging. We're going to get to in a second. So let's say you're really busy with your incident tracking system, and your database is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And a bigger database is generally slower than a small, slim, tiny database.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's set ourselves up for some future scalability, some new behavior. So I'm just totally making up a requirement that the UI is not only going to show incident data for if it's closed, we want the incident data to basically kind of disappear from the UI for 3 days. Not that it's not still there somewhere, but we want it to go to cold storage and get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about that in a second. So just the logic, there's some business logic we'll add later to make this a more complete example. But if everything's good and we should be doing what we want to do, I got 3 things going on. I got the request body, the response body. I have the whatever events we may do. This is a special type in Wolverine that just says, hey, these are events I want applied to the aggregate stream. So whatever stream is represented by, this guy would have to have. Man, I am all over the place, guys. Need to have. Nope. Sorry, we got the route argument.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna say it's on the
sorry.
route. Yeah.
Yep, it's on the route. By default, we're looking for a route argument called ID. Everything's good.
So just because that's on the route there, it will know to get that incident with that ID.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
And even though this is the wrong handler, anytime, there's too much magic, I don't know what Wolverine's doing, lean heavily on the code gen preview, or ditch the magic and just write explicit code, because you can do that too. But then a response, and then, the outgoing messages, it's list of objects that just says, I want these messages kicked out as messages through Wolverine's messaging. So assuming that we're all good to close it, I'm going to pin one event, and there's the body. I'm going to pin event, and then I also want this message kicked out at the same time. Now, one of the features Wolverine has is the ability to schedule messages to be processed at another time. To some degree, if you're using a transport, like Azure Service Bus has really strong support for scheduling delivery,
Mm-hmm.
it'll try to use that. Otherwise, it's going to be database backed and polling. So just to know that it's possible no matter what. So I'm going to kick this out. I'm going to schedule it for 3 days from now. Let's come over and talk about what it's going to be doing. Show you a few details. Now back in program.
Go back to line 48 for 1 second. I was just at the Code Mesh conference last week and had a great time. Jeremy, you weren't there this time. I missed you, buddy. But there was one sentence that one of the presenters said that I've been really thinking about. And it was something like, how many code bases do you work with where you're like, this doesn't suck. This is actually a joy to work with, and it stays that way over time. And frankly, I could only really think of one example, and it's stuff that stuff right there is just, I mean, you almost guess it, and it's there. Beautiful, intuitive. Love it. Anyhow, sorry.
No, it's all good. Glad you think so.
Yeah.
So last line 48, we're going to schedule an archive incident message to be handled or to be delivered in 3 days from now. So whatever the current time is, add 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real time. It'll be close.
Yeah.
couple other details. Now, this is all about trying to go make your application go faster. So, a couple things we're going to do. When this actually applies, we do it pretty crudely, but I'm going to append a special archived event. This is actually in Marten itself. I'm going to apply an archived event to the stream. That's going to tell Marten, hey, this event stream is now archived. And it's just a marker, but we're going to make that matter. And then I'm also going to go ahead and delete the incident from the database, which probably shouldn't need to do. But anyway, let that go. Let's make this a little bit more meaningful. Let's come do a little bit more. And let me try to remember yeah, there we go. All right. So we said, what's faster, a big querying a really big table or querying a smaller table? So we're going to turn on PostgreSQL native partitioning for the events table and the stream table. So we're going to create two tables under the cover that any events that are archived are going to be off to the bigger archive table, and everything that's hot, that's active, is going to be in what's hopefully a much smaller active table and we're constantly moving as this is closed, we'll move them over to the archive thing.
Yeah.
Why that's important is Marten, as it's doing most of its work, is always throwing an archived equals false flag on there, and always what's going to happen is most of the work Marten is doing is going to be against that smaller hot table.
Yeah.
While the cold table can grow all at once, but if we keep the hot table, relatively stable, that's going to keep our performance good over time.
Beautiful. That is genius.
That took a long time to get there. It took years to get there.
It feels like the kind of genius born of desperation, like that was actually solving somebody's problem, right? It wasn't just wishful thinking. I wish we could do something like this.
I bet that's been on this was in the backlog for about 5 years before we got to it last year.
Beautiful.
That's a big one. Now, this incident, this is another show you. We haven't talked much about this, but Marten is also a document database on top of now. If you wanted to do this, some kind of workflow system where we're storing the incidents, they're JSON in the database, you could use soft deletes on the incident documents themselves. So there's, instead of wiping out the row, you're just marking it as now deleted. So we can also use partitioning against the soft delete. So you have, an archive table for the incident projection data as well. So most of your querying, most of the time when you're querying, Wolverine or Marten in this case is always saying where deleted is false. So it would always be querying against the active set of documents. So you could have the old documents over here. If you wanted to, you could query against them and query against the bigger table, but for the most part, use the smaller ones.
Gotcha.
Now, it's kind of a moot point because the incident is built up from the events. Yeah. If you wanted to look at the old incident data, you could just rebuild the projection on the fly. So you probably wouldn't use that soft deleted, but I just want to show, hey, that's possible.
So that soft delete there, if you go back to the handler.
Yeah.
That you're on. Okay.
That's why. So on the read side, you've probably got a page where it's show me all the incidents for this customer. It would only be querying against active, non-delete, not soft deleted incidents. So
yeah,
using
when you were typing that, you said I probably don't need that line because you're basically saying there's two different ways to accomplish this, right? Like that, the line 13 there would be probably good enough unless you were doing the soft deletes as well. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I'm throwing the QC thing committee in. So this archive here, that is going to just mark the raw events and stream data
Mm-hmm.
as archive, but it's not doing anything to necessarily kill off this incident.
Okay.
But I could say this is going to be goofy.
Oh yeah.
We could do that so that
Yeah.
anytime an archived event comes through, it's just so archived has special meaning with Marten. It just means, hey, you should archive this stream now when it runs through the projection. But that was done purposely to is done actually purposely to make the aggregate handler workflow easier to
Yeah.
test, giving you a more declarative way to mark when a stream needed to be archived. So, but also that people could trying to push people more into the current year to this is a relatively new feature. Turn this on if you can and be really aggressive about archiving events and streams. And this will keep your application performing well over time, even though you're racking up tons of events and streams.
Fantastic. Super cool. Yeah, I think there's a couple places I'm going to look at using that right now, even though I'm not really running into any performance issues yet. It just makes it a little more logical. You don't have to worry
Yes.
about it. Yeah.
So my company has a couple clients where they have very, very large data sets.
Mm-hmm.
So with their help, with their partnership, we spent a lot of work in 2024 on features exactly like this that were meant for improving scalability and performance when you have very large event stores.
Very cool. Well, that's a lot of stuff. Thank you, Jeremy. I think there are about 1 million possible follow-on videos that could come from this. So we'll look at the comments and see what people think. What do you want to see next? But this is really eye-opening for me, and clarifying in some ways. Super cool.
Good stuff. This project of a lot of years. Hey, a lot of people have contributed to this. This is not me in a dark corner doing this all in a year. This is a lot of people's
Yeah.
effort, a lot of feedback from lots of different people.
And it sure feels like, despite, how much has been added, how much you're adding to it here, it's also, I mean, looking at this program.cs, it's getting simpler in a way and a little more straightforward to get started. And I think that's what I really appreciate about this particular presentation is you kind of build up from a couple principles, and there's all sorts of little switches and bells and knobs waiting for you when you need them. Super cool.
Yeah, I wish there weren't so many switches, but we're gonna have to beat that with documentation.
Yeah, I was thinking that a fun thing to do might actually, when you were looking at the one endpoint, and you're like, you can always just write out the very imperative code.
Hmm.
Take some examples of that and refactor them. Like, hey, Jeremy, this looks harder than it needs to be. Show me the easier way to do it. So maybe that's something we'll take a look at in the future as well.
That sounds good.
All right, buddy. I'll get editing. Looks good.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much for doing this with me today.
Very fun. I appreciate it.